call from Marty Stauffer, and he said, I've always wanted to do a film about Mustangs. Will you shoot it for me? And oh, I was just thrilled because Marty had never allowed me to shoot for him. I'd been working on the series for 5 years as a writer and an editor, but in Marty's Arkansas world, I guess girls didn't shoot. So he had seen a film that I did called Spirits of the Rainforest, which won an Emmy for Best Documentary in 1993. And I had shot most of the natural history footage in South America over about a 6-month period. So before I put the phone down from saying, yes, Marty, I'd love to do that, I started to worry because I had had horses as a child, and was I blown away? The first thing that struck me was they're so wolf-like. Now I know that sounds pretty silly because wild horses and burros are prey species, but they live in family groups that are unlike any other hoofed animal in our hemisphere. Think about it. Deer, elk, bighorn sheep, mountain goats, what are the other hoofed ones? Pronghorn, antelope. They all live in a very different way. Wild horses live in a society that is. It's very wolf-like. And what you have is the male caretaker, the stallion, also known as a band stallion, and he's there 365 days a year. And he has 2 main jobs. Keep the family together and protect the family. And Raven and his family opened their world to me, and for that I will be eternally grateful. But when they did, they changed my life. That fall, after I had learned about their rich society and how they took care of their kids without kicking and biting, but just by a flick of the ear or whatever, and how they have a pecking order within their family groups, and maybe we even noticed it the other day in some of the groups that we saw, however they were very calm when we saw them. There's a pecking order amongst the bands in the area. And on the Pryor Mountains, because they're vertical migrators, they're spread out in the spring and during the winter, but in the spring, they'll follow the greening grass of the mountaintop. And when they do, they come in very close contact with each other. So the 20-some bands you might see up there are within a few square miles of each other, if you can imagine that. So every behavior becomes enlarged, and it was easy even for a greenhorn like me to start to pick up on. It's more difficult in our wilder or in our western areas where the horses are more spread out. But they had 3 foals that summer. The last born was a strawberry run born to a young Palomino mare. And 2 of those 3 foals were killed in the roundup. And they had been my study group. So I thought I was going insane. I really, literally did. That's what I felt like. Something must be wrong. No one could be so cruel to something so beautiful. This was a horseback roundup, not a helicopter roundup. And many of the horses had died, and the strawberry run colt had been driven off a cliff and broke its back. The other foal, the Bria foal, died because they fed straight alfalfa hay in the corrals, and it died of untreated diarrhea. And I filmed that in the Bighorn County landfill. We are all framed by our experiences, and that was mine. And so I didn't become a quote-unquote wild horse advocate immediately, but I did begin delving into what was driving this cruelty. And my pain and the fact that I wanted to run away and Marty wouldn't let me, thank you, Marty, turned into a joyous spring the next spring when 2 filly foals were born. They were owned by Ann Evans. They were removed ultimately in 1997. But Ann, who's my close friend, another member of the Cloud Foundation, owns Smoky Mahogany. And then a couple months later, a little pale colt was born. And he tottered out of the trees in front of my camera. I wasn't seeking them out. Much like Raven and my experience had been together was they would find me. And that beautiful morning they found me and they brought their son in from Montana. And that became, I guess you could say the rest is history in a way. I've created 3 documentaries about cloud's life. It's the only documentation of a wild animal from birth in our hemisphere. And my documentation continues. Cloud is doing very well. By the way, he is 17 years old. He's produced numerous offspring, and his grandson Echo is still alive and well with priors, thanks to so many of you who wrote letters on Echo's behalf, urging the BLM not to remove this pale Palomino coat. So, I created the Cloud Foundation with others, and Julianne French is also on our board, and she's here with Ann. Julianne, raise your hand, from Tucson, Arizona. I created the Cloud Foundation with these friends in 2005 because I didn't feel like we were working as advocates very effectively together. I felt that there was a lot of division amongst people, and that we would just go our own way and try to protect Cloud and his herd. And then this organization has grown and grown so much that now we're trying to protect them all the wild horses and burros in the West. And that is our goal. Just to give you a little bit of a background, very, very briefly, because some of you are not really, I don't think, as aware of wild horse issues as certainly others are. It's a very diverse group I'm saying here. But technically, wild horses are protected on federal lands that are managed by both the BLM and the Forest Service. And that protection lies in a unanimously passed Act of Congress in 1971. Can you imagine today anything being unanimously passed? But the Wild Horse and Burro Act was passed. And horses were to be protected and managed where presently found. So in 1971, they passed the act, but it took 2 or 3 years to go survey the lands on which they might live. And the BLM and Forest Service identified 339 herd areas in 10 western states for management. Since that time, we have approximately 179 herds left. And the acreage has gone down by over 20 million acres. So wild horses and burros, since the act was passed, have lost a lot of ground. The act was intended to preserve them because they were fast disappearing from the land. Well, ladies and gentlemen, they are faster disappearing right now, and we have to stop it now. I want to really open this up to Q&A very quickly here, because I've had some great questions from people that I would like everybody to hear my answers and the comments and answers from others who are in this audience who are have a longer history in this than I do, such as Craig Downer. How do we break the cycle of roundup and removal? How do we do it? Some people might not like this answer, but this is the way I see it. We have to PZP every single female 1 year and older to try to get a hold of the reproduction in our herds. Granted, the herds are small, but I don't see that this is going I don't see that the helicopters are going to continue flying and the bait traps are going to continue to be set up until we can achieve this goal, which is mortality and reproduction are basically equal over time. We have to have flexible AMLs, and we have to raise those AMLs to genetically viable numbers. I think we have a better chance of getting the appropriate management level, excuse me for the acronym, appropriate management level. That's one of those BLM words, isn't it? Appropriate management level. Well, it's the inappropriate management level. And so we have to convert it to a truly appropriate level, and that level is the minimum level of genetic viability. By that I mean the herds have to have 150 to 200 breeding adults. That is a minimally genetically viable herd. We have a better chance of getting that level on some of these small herds if BLM and Forest Service truly believe that we have a way to manage the horses at that level. Hence, my newborn, I guess I'm a newborn zealot to PZP, because you know what PZP is to me? PZP is a predator. We have virtually no predators on our wild horse herd and burrowers. Do you know why? I mean, they say in their documents that wild horses have no effective predators. Well, they have no effective predators because the predators have been killed. So until we can get back to this natural cycle of nature calling the shots, then what do we have to do? We have to, as humans, try to manipulate the population so that it's fairly stagnant at a high enough level where it's still genetically viable. But this predator, this PZP, the good thing about this drug is you don't have to catch the horses to deliver it. It's dartable. And it's reversible. And so you always are working toward natural management. What I mean by natural management is humans don't do anything. Nature calls all the shots, and that has always been my goal. But I don't think we can get there unless we can really accept PZP as a method to control the populations that we see now. If we have any hope of those little foals that we saw yesterday growing up in freedom with their families, then we have to get a handle on the Roundup and removal cycle. And this is the way I think we can do it. Now, I would like to open it up to your questions. I'm very familiar with bait trapping in the priors recently. It was what they have even called a one-of-a-kind event in the history of the BLM. And if you want, I'll explain it a little bit. What we have been as advocates is extremely effective in showing the cruelty of helicopter roundups. I congratulate every single one of you that has been on the line with a camera documenting the cruelty of these roundups. And BLM is realizing that these are becoming unpopular with the public, and so they're examining bait trapping. But much like BLM, they will turn lemons into lemonade, won't they? They will do it in the most expensive way, the most cruel way, and they'll turn it and tip it on its ear. But here's the way it worked effectively in the priors, and I know how much it cost the BLM to do it. It cost approximately $350 per horse to catch 150 horses in the prior mountains over a 6-week period. It took 6 weeks because it was a very highly selective removal. All the horses were so known and their genetics so known and their lineages so known that they tiered the removal into 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 were the horses that had multiple siblings of identical lineage on the mountain. Tier 2, maybe they only had one that was identical, but the mother was not on PZP. And Tier 3 were those that are uniquely or are genetically and color unique, and that is where Echo fell. And by Jove, they stuck by their tiers. The BLM did their job. Actually, it was Matt Dillon with the Prior Mustang Center who did their job for them. He created the tiers, gave it to them, but they stuck with it. And the reason it took 6 weeks to do this is that the dominant horses will walk in to this round corral and they won't leave. And guess who that might have been? Lauren, who's my associate director and a great young woman who wasn't able to be with me this morning, was there, and we watched Jared Biden, the wild horse and burro specialist, over a period of about 2 hours catch Jackson's band. This is a large band of horses that had 4 target group A to remove. And he had a little trouble that afternoon. It took him 2 hours just to get Jackson's band in. But in the afternoon when we watched, Cloud came in to the round pen, and he wouldn't leave. And so Jared would just real slowly, and I mean, he's just a wonderful horseman. He would just go like this. And then I could hear him say, Cloud, we've had this conversation before. And other horses would come, and he would just very slowly walk toward them so they would leave. You know, and in one case, Cloud go because he was that forceful, because the bait is minerals. Mineral blocks like we give our horses, right? And they're like crack cocaine to these horses. They are crackheads, all of them. I mean, you put these blocks out and they go for them. And what they did very intelligently is they put the blocks out before they put the round pen up. And the round pen wasn't just a round pen. It was divided in half, but not by a straight line, by kind of a looping line. There were gates, 4 gates. There were little pins that were set up on the inside that had an interior gate, so they could separate, very carefully separate out, because they were after 30 to 40 horses. I mean, if they'd been after 30 to 40 horses, they could have done it in 2 weeks. They probably could have done it in a week. They would have just removed Boulder's band, Cloud's band, you know, the most dominant bands, and they were done with it. In fact, Jim Sparks, who's the field manager of the in Billings, made that point. He said it took 6 weeks, but had it been a quote-unquote gate cut, it would have been very quick. A gate cut meaning whoever comes in this door gets taken. But that's not what they were about. And I commend them for this. And this cost $350 a horse to catch them, but it also included all the veterinary work on these animals, all their shots, all their freeze branding, their gelding. They gelded the young stallions, everything, $350 a horse. And it was done slowly and carefully and selectively. Same thing can happen, Arlene, in Coal Creek if there had to be a roundup. You know, you would do it, you would know every single band, you would know who's common, you know, who potentially has like offspring, and then you would do a selective removal. Very simple to do there. BLM is recommending, or they're getting bids for 2 types of trapping, bait and water. Water trapping, I'm not so cool, you know, I'm pretty cool on water trapping because in some places, horses will languish outside because their water source has been encircled with these round pen panels. So what you do is you put the bait trap up near the water source, near where they came in. I bet you we could watch that band that we come into water, and I bet you 9 times out of 10, if they were in that area to start with, they would have taken that same route and they would have encountered the goodies on their way. So this is a new exploration route for BLM, and I think it's far superior to these horrible helicopter roundups. Particularly with the burros, they knock them down with the struts. They run theirs into the snow into exhaustion, and personally filmed that. So I think that's a good step. But sandwash is a herd in northern Colorado, and BLM is saying it will cost $1,000 a horse to catch the horses in sandwash. Just to catch the horses. That's not the vet work. That's not the processing. That's not the adoption. That's not. $1,000. Now, I'm not sure how they get to $1,000, but what they're doing then is they're saying it's not practical, is it? If it costs, it costs about, I think coutures get about $450 a horse. Does that sound right, Craig? I think in somewhere in that range. Yeah, somewhere in that range, $450 a horse versus $1,000 a horse. So what they're going to do is they're going to say it's not economically feasible to do it that way. And we know that that's just not true. And even BLM and Billings, where the manages department might say, yeah, on these great big herds, it's going to be difficult. Well, it's only difficult if you don't want to do it. If you really want to do something, you can make it work. And we know you can make it work. I would venture to say in Coal Creek that you could have a bevy of volunteers that would help to trap these horses rather than chase them with a helicopter. Do you not agree?
Yes. Exactly what we want to do.
Yeah,
don't want
good.
to listen to us. Why would it cost $350 in the Friars and $1,000 in Colorado? That doesn't make any sense.
I have no idea. The sandwash horses, Patty, have you photographed sandwash very much? Patty Williams is here from Colorado, one of our really great Western Slope advocates.
Right, and I'm not familiar with sandwash horses, mostly with West Douglas and East Pans Creek.
Well, when Carol Walker was there, Carol did our beautiful poster that you can see back on our table, and the DVDs and books, there are a few copies, and I can sign them, and that's my pitch for that. And it's a donation. In Sandwash, the horses are also known. There's a lady, Nancy Roberts, who has tracked these horses. She has put them down in their family groups, and she hasn't done it for very many years, so she doesn't go back very far as the lineages go. But when Carol Walker was photographing the horses, she said they would come 30 and 40 to a water hole. And she said all you have to do is watch them. You put the trap up near the water hole, and then you go over in another section, and there'd be 30 or 40 over there. I mean, it's a fairly big herd area. It's 170,000 acres, something like that. But there are, I think, 370 horses out there, and they would want to remove probably half of them. And they want to do a and they've said we're going to do a helicopter roundup. So, anybody have any questions about bait trapping and how that might work and how much better that is? I don't know, Palomino, they've not done any. You're not familiar with bait trapping, are you?
Not really, I'm not in
Yeah.
the lens issues.
Right. Well, if you can get the horses to taste these minerals, you've got them. I mean, as an adopter, and some of you have adopted wild horses. Some of you have adopted a lot of wild horses. Palomino Armstrong is wonderful in adopting foals that lost their parents largely because of helicopter roundups. They get left behind. They can't keep up. And so people out of the kindness of their heart, like Palomino, take in the worst cases and nurse them back to health. So thanks for what you do.
We use at the sanctuary, they know the sound of the truck, for food. And that's all you have to do. And even like the wild ones where people are feeding when they're not supposed to, but they come to the cars.
Yeah.
And, if you, like you said, if they get used to the taste, you can do it real easy with bait trapping.
Yeah.
And there's no drama, so.
No, there really isn't. It isn't drama, particularly if they do it as slowly and carefully and have it set up in such an intricate way as they did in the priors. That was absolutely fascinating. Yes, Marjorie.
We as you know, we got quite a few wild burros in from California just recently, and so I put a bucket of loose minerals out for them, and there was a major fight over that bucket of minerals. So there was one burro in the group. His name was Stubby, and he came over and he kept saying, "Come with me." He wanted me to part the seas for him, so I walked over to him right to Bob, and he got his minerals. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the minerals are crack.
Yeah.
They really are crack to these animals. They cannot resist it. Absolutely cannot resist it. Yes, way in the back. Vanna.
Thank you so much. Hi, Ginger. I heard that Dave Couture already has one of the contracts for bait trapping, and he, as we all know, is known for humane treatment of wild horses and girls, and that there will be no observers allowed. Is the reason why the bait trapping has went so well is because of your presence? I'm seriously worried if Couture is involved in this.
I sympathize with you, and I share your concerns. Dave Couture, for those of you who don't know, is historically the major contractor, helicopter contractor. He began in 76 or 78. Whenever vehicles were allowed to chase horses, he was in on the ground floor. And they are extremely good at it. They can take their time. I'm sure that they can humanely bait trap. I would hope that Jared Bybee and the Priors would consult with them on how he did it. The Coutures think they know it all, however. They really, that's probably enough said about Sue and Dave Couture. But no, I do share your concern about that. They believe that water trapping is cruel. And so I believe it can be as well. You would hate to see horses that needed water that are standing outside the pond, let's say, is fenced in where we were yesterday, and that's their water source. And yet they're frightened, too frightened to come in. I doubt that the Cold Creek horses would count because they're so used to people. And let me just say something about that specific herd and about ecotourism. I think it's very, very, very important, all of you, to know that you must not approach a wild horse closer than 50 feet. And you must never, ever feed them. The mystique, the wonder of them is their complete and total independence. Their complete lack of need of us. To me, that makes them almost mystical. They can survive without us. They come in the most harm when they're with us. And so they're safest where? On the range with their families. What do they want most? Freedom and family. What do they abhor? Being caught, being terrified. And so I'm seeking a way where they don't have to be rounded up. And I also want to see this ecotourism thing fly, because I know it can. But we have to be the people who say there are rules. And the rule is that we watch them, they don't watch us. We're the observers, we're the people who can learn from them. They don't need to learn how to be beggars from us. And so people need to stay away from them and give them the respect. I mean, how would you like somebody to walk into your bedroom with an apple if all you've ever eaten is bits of grass and Joshua trees, you know? Yes, Arlene?
Just last week, the BLM taught the burros by shaking Dorito bags. And the burros that have been hand-fed by all the tourists at Red Rock walked right into the pens, just following the sound of a Dorito bag. And that's the kind of thing that we need to stop. The second problem with that, besides what happens to them and their family units, is if one member of the public gets between a dominant bear and a subordinate bear who's being kicked at, and that tourist gets hurt, you know the BLM will come in and say, we've got to take them. So
Absolutely.
we have to create guidelines, but not BLM's guidelines.
Right. Well, you know, they have a very active viewing of wild horses in the McCullough Peaks. And I think they've done a very good job. They have tour buses, and occasionally they let the people get out of the buses, but they're not allowed to charge out there and go see. And they try to keep 500 feet away. I think because I'm a photographer and a filmmaker, I think that's excessive. I think of 50 to 100 feet, but here's my rule of thumb when I'm out in the field filming. If they're paying more attention to me than each other, I back away. Because I want to see them do their thing. I'm not interested in me. I can go home, I can pet my horse, I can ride my horse, I can feed my horse. I don't need to do it with this wonderful, wild, dramatic species that can be just, mystical for tourism, I think. Julian?
Ginger, I just wanted to offer, in terms of the contracts, the government is obligated to evaluate contracts, and one of the priorities is small business, minorities, veterans. I'm sure there's a lot of horse people in this room that have the expertise that could submit for any of these contracts to do the base trapping, and that would be humane. And so I would ask those of you that would be, feel confident to do that, to bid on these contracts against Couture.
Well, particularly if they're going to get $1,000 a horse. I mean, it's just insane.
Exactly, and
I'd like
if
some
this is a
of
small
that.
business that's run by a woman, or veterans, or minorities, they're going to get more points on that contract. And that's something that I don't think our group has really explored, and we certainly can participate in that process.
I think a lot of these contracts have already been let, and I think they've been let to Couture, and I think they've been let to, I don't know whether Sunjay, the infamous Sunjay Roundup Company, is part of that contract process. And then the gentleman in northern New Mexico that has trapped in the priors in 2006 has been awarded a lot of contracts. And they try to make you think it takes forever. You have to have some supernatural powers, to do it. And you have to have all this high-tech equipment. And it does take longer to do bait trapping. But it's not an impossibility. You just have to understand horse behavior, and you have to understand where they are, where they go, where their trails are, where the water sources are, who they are, who's in the family bands. I mean, when we were out there yesterday, and I said to somebody, you want to identify the signature animal. Well, in Raven's band, who was the signature animal? It was Phoenix, Cloud's mother. You might not see anybody, but you'd see that Palomino, because she'd stick out, and then you'd see one other, and you go, aha. Well, Of course, she was the only Cal, so that made it easy. That City Buckskin is the only one probably like that. You know what family group you have. And unlike what Joan Guilfoyle, the head of the Law Enforcement Borough Program, has said, don't name them, don't personalize them, don't know them, and don't share the information. Okay, you just do the reverse of that. Okay? You name them, you personalize them, you get to know them, and you find them, and you show them to other people. Yes, Ann.
I think there's one thing we can never forget, is that the BLM's goal is to eliminate wild horses on public lands. And, so whatever they do, they're gonna try to turn it and make that happen. So I think, so while we wanna support PCP, we wanna really support increasing the AML. So you can't do one without the other. And so, we just have to be clear on what the real intent is, because that's always what it comes back to. Always it comes back to. You look at their documents, they've talked about having a sterile herds. Now they're gonna have that sterile herd with meth and Pickens. So they are laser focused on what they want their outcome to be, and we can't forget that.
Thanks, Ann. Yes.
May I ask, because I wanted to ask you ultimately, I appreciate so much what you guys are doing in the wild. And this gentleman here, fixing the holes in the water trough that's been shot full of holes and running the water to it so that there's water where there needs to be water. What did you say about lovely quote that's not even in this book of quotes about if you want to find water, you follow the horse trail, but you need to follow the right direction. But what I really want to ask you, not to be sarcastic or flip, but you must have a lot of relationships with politicians and people who are in positions of power over the years that you've developed. And so what I'd like to ask you is, well, what would be the mineral block for the BLM and the politicians? What's the crack cocaine for them?
Well, anybody that gets elected, that's the crack cocaine vote. So what I would suggest is, how many days is it until the election, presidential election? Not very many days away. And if we could go, John, to maybe the last piece of this, I think there's 4 little pieces.
Yes,
Oh, do I do that?
you can do it.
Oh, I can do it. Hey, oh, I got the power. Isn't that a beautiful animal? Yeah. They are very, very effective predators of wild horse foals. And I'm sure but perhaps not quite as effective with burros, because burros, unlike horses, what do horses do to survive? They run like heck and they can run very fast, but little burros will stand their ground and they'll fight.
They'll surround them too.
Oh, yeah? Oh, where am I going? Okay, here we go. What's the crack for a politician? A vote. And how many votes he can get and whether he can get elected. I don't know how many days there are to election day, but I called the other day, and I want every one of you to call that number every day. And I want you to get 10 or 12 people to do the same thing. These are volunteers that answer that phone line, and they're very nice, and they write down what your topic is. You need to be very nice. You don't need to be, all enraged and angry, but concerned. And what is particularly important is to say, this issue matters to me on the way I vote. Yes, go ahead.
And you might mention 50,000 signatures on the change.org petition. These are 50,000 people who voted. And in this election, 50,000 documented like that, I think it gets their attention.
Yes.
So I hate to say this, going back down this thing about trying, but of course that's a major tool, I guess, that we have, is we have to be able to, get their attention as politicians. And this is one.
Well, and we're in a swing state right here, so it would be particularly important when you call to tell them where you're from. And if you're from Nevada and Colorado, and what are some of the other?
Idaho.
Idaho's not a swing state. Florida, absolutely, you know, with focus on these swing states.
But still, even the swing state, even people who aren't in swing states, if you have wild horses, you can be an advocate. You still can lend your voice.
Oh, well, of course,
Because
of course.
I don't think we should just play like we're political chips either. I mean, there's a consensus built into it.
Well, that's what we're talking about, is consensus is, you know, when RT and Terry went to Congressman Moran's the other day, they had 16,000 signatures on postcards. We turned in the 22,000 postcards we had at our office, and you had petitions and letters and pictures. I have pictures from children, just break your heart, you know.
Our petition has 111,000 signatures.
111,000 on a petition here. We need for the president to know this, so that information is important. If when you call in, you can say, hey, did you know that Change.org has 50,000 signatures on this? Marjorie, whatever yours is. But you need to communicate that. Well, for one thing, you need to all communicate that to me so I can put it out there, and every other organization that has a fairly large Facebook presence, which Cloud has, and I don't, Cloud does. And we can get that out there, and then we can frame that message in an important way. Because it's the vote that's the crack.
And I have friends who are sick of me asking them to make phone calls and write letters and emails and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so they have authorized me to call for them. And so I have about 12 friends that I call for.
Oh, that's a very good idea.
And I'm totally authorized. I have their email, I have,
Yeah,
you
you
know.
just say, I'm Sally Smith,
And I'm calling for my friend Sally, or my father, my.
Wow, that's a fantastic idea, because a lot of people will say, I just don't have the time during the course of the day to be on hold for 15 minutes. Of course, you can't just put it on speaker. But no, that's a wonderful, wonderful idea. Wonderful idea, yeah.
Hi, I'm from Florida. I'm Shelley from South Florida.
Yes, all right.
I went to a small meeting by a Florida State rep from HSUS, and they're all about legislation. So she gave us really great ideas, because I'm not very much political stuff. But she said to get to know your local people, to bring the issues to them, because sometimes your local representatives, they don't even know what's going on and what's important to you, so you have to do that. But maybe if you guys in your own states, you have an HSUS rep, and they're so knowledgeable, because that's all they do is legislation stuff. And they can tell you who to talk to exactly, and who to present yourself to nicely, like you said, and not accusatory. And it's really helpful for the causes.
Yeah, that's very important. Unfortunately, like in Colorado Springs, where I am, my congressman is so right-wing that it really is a waste of time. So you try to find people that really you think you can move. You can't move somebody way out here over here, but if somebody's on either side there, you might be able to get them with you. And because this is a federal issue, these are federally protected animals for the most part, we're looking at congressional representatives and United States senators. And you're absolutely right. If you have a way and an inroad into those congressional offices, it's very, very important.
It's been a very.
I'm Victoria McCullough. I'm also from Florida. I found Florida particularly unreceptive when we tried to pass the equine protection bill in Florida, but I didn't let it stop me. I also used the help of the Humane Society in their positions, and I used a lot of their information, but we ended up in the middle of locations with the cattlemen because they were the biggest barrier for us, because Florida happens to be one of the second producers of cattle in the nation. But I took my state representative, who's now running for state senator, and we passed the equine bill with all 3 readings and unanimous. And we now have one of the most significant equine bills in the nation with an automatic felony for abuse.
Also for being in possession of horse meat.
Well, we had an unfortunate situation that helped us. Florida is truthfully the only state in the nation where we have over 88 horses who have been butchered that were private pets. in a public facility. They were taken from their home, either slaughtered on their facility or out on the street, left as a carcass. And we have 4 18 and 17-year-olds in jail now. We're the first state to be able to process that bill and make that transition. But the most important thing is for Florida, it's an ethical issue. It is, you're coming into someone's home. It was very helpful for us because we could really showcase what could happen. The drama of that gave us a theater. It gave us a great advantage. But what I want to tell you about politicians is that it's not necessarily your representative also that's the most powerful aid to youth legislation. It's the contributors. Look who is the major contributors of those politicians, because politicians do not get elected by voters. They get elected by contributors. And it's very important in your particular states. Take a look at who's supporting these people. It's behind all of them. And get to them. If it's a pharmaceutical company, whatever it is, use your voices, because those contributors is the lifeblood to those people. And it's really important. It helped us tremendously, and it's helping us now because we're working on something else. But I'm here today to learn about. I've been concentrating on slaughter horses and the domestic issue. For me, that trip yesterday was amazing. I happened to McCullough Peaks because that's relative, and so it was an honor for me to visit there. But for me to understand what's happening here and to see the support is tremendous. So the politics is where we're all going to have to live, and it's pretty easy if you can find all of the aspects. Contributors, politicians, get to know them. They're going to need a big change because Congress left yesterday and they weren't very popular. So they need to change. So we can help them.
Thank you, Victoria. Yes.
Okay, I have a question about the PCP. My concern is the safety of it because, as we know, their goal is to eliminate, exterminate. And
Right.
so,
And that's why they have other drugs they want to use instead of.
so how many suppliers are there, and how do we ensure the safety? Do you know, or do you have any insight?
Well, PZP is now, and Keith probably could speak to this somewhat, is now an FDA-approved drug. It was an experimental drug up until, I think, just earlier this year. It has been used since, for 30 years on acetate, and there have been no health issues with that drug. If you use it in consecutive years, you can render a mare sterile. And so that's why I recommend that you track who you're giving it to and keep records, very careful records of what you're doing. BLM has set PZP up for failure. This is a lemons out of lemonade again, which is what they tend to do because, as Ann said, their goal is the extermination of wild horses and crows in our public lands. And so they will opt for these other drugs that are more long-lasting, that do affect behavior, that can have physical problems. And you really need to, that's a whole field. I was at the fertility conference, and I think, Keith, you were there too, probably, in Jackson just the other day. And there are Gonacon and Spayvac and other drugs that really have not been carefully tested at all. And yet, guess what? Well, let's just give it to them, Because the hope is that they'll get the silver bullet. You know what the silver bullet is? Permanent sterilization.
Yeah.
That's the silver bullet for them. Yeah.
Ginger, you mentioned that it can be reversed. How is that done?
It just wears off. It just wears off over time. PZP has a whole story, and it takes a long time to explain it. But it's over time it wears off. Usually with a yearling or 2-year-old filly, you would see her return to fertility after a year or two. And that's one reason BLM doesn't like this drug, because you have to then be on it. You have to give it yearly if you don't want to have that mare reproduce, because she will return to fertility within a few years. If you give it for 4 or 5 years in a row, or 6 or 7 years in a row, up to 7 years, I think, in a row, then the chances are that she will no longer produce a foal at all, like Cloud's mother. She produced a foal last in 2000 and, well, I have Sachs. How old is Sachs? He's 5. Okay, so that was the last foal that she had. She was on that drug. She's 21 years old. So it's remarkable the longevity of the horses in the wild. And there are so many mythologies. I'd love to just spend all day with you. We just talk about myth busting. You know, that they're out there starving, that they're overpopulated, they're in need of rescue. They live, I have heard learned people say they live 7 years in the wild. It's like, how about 27 in the case of the Prior Mountain wild horses? Now they do vary, but you know, there's all these mythologies that we just need to break apart. Yeah.
We did it's a study at the prison for BLM. I just got to go help do it, but well, Dr. Lou from and that's it. They're doing it. They're checking a 2-year one out.
Yes, there is a 2-year time release PCP, and the hope is that it will be guardable. Because when you do bait trapping, I mean, if you do bait trapping, then you have animals in a pen. I can even hit the hip of a mare with a dart gun.
Those work just started in like that.
Yeah.
So if that works, and it's not supposed to be like spay back.
No, but it is a longer acting. It is a longer acting drug.
And Ginger, we're actually out of time.
Oh, okay.
I'm performing first aid back here. Craig Donovan from his hand up so long that all the blood is drained from his left arm. So if you can keep it real quick.
This is Craig. He's not going to keep it quick.
Being the election year now, I think it's really important we put pressure on the people that are going after the wild horse and burros in their own cynical and often very hypocritical way. If Obama is elected again, we should really clamor that Secretary of Interior Kenneth P. Salazar be removed. And, the wild horses.
Let me address that, Craig, if I could.
And Raul Grijalva, who was on the inside for the secretary, he would be a good one.
Yeah, Craig is also on our board of the Cloud Foundation, and we really value his expertise. The rumor is that Ken Salazar is not going to continue as Secretary of the Interior. Colorado, I'm sorry to say. And he has a real axe to grind against wild horses, and so I think we can do better. There are rumors as to who, if President Obama is reelected, who might be Secretary of the Interior, who wants the job, and we're kind of working behind the scenes to see what we can find out about that. But, you know, everybody can make a difference. Not everybody can do everything. But if everybody does just one thing, cumulatively, we all can make a difference for these animals. Thank you so much.